Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is Jonathan Porter, Chief Meteorologist at AccuWeather. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me.
Brittany, good to be with you.
It's good to have you. It's good to have your expertise here because it's a really serious situation. The first hurricane of the 2024 Atlantic season made its way through the Caribbean. It's on its way to Jamaica. What do we need to know?
Well, I think that's the key point. This has been a very devastating storm across parts of the southern Windward Islands that dealt head on with the impacts of a Category 5 hurricane yesterday on Monday across those areas. But this storm is going to be a threat for days to come. Next up, Jamaica and the Cayman Islands. Then we're going to be concerned about impacts on the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. And we have increasing concerns about rain and wind across parts of southeast Texas as well. So this is going to be a major storm that people need to be aware of here as we head into the U.S. holiday here over the next couple of days.
Let's first start with Jamaica because that's where Hurricane Beryl is going next. What can people in Jamaica expect? And as you said, this was a Category 5 storm. Can the people of Jamaica expect it to be Category 5 once it makes landfall?
Well, this storm has been encountering some changing atmospheric conditions as it's headed very rapidly to the west here over the last 24 hours. And one of the things it's facing is increasing wind shear. And what does that mean when meteorologists talk about wind shear? We're talking about changing wind speed and direction through the atmosphere. And when a hurricane enters into an area of increasing wind shear, that can be disruptive to its circulation. That's why we're already seeing the winds of Beryl come down a bit. The storm is losing a bit of wind intensity, and that is going to continue to be the trend here, we think, over the next couple of days. But it is going to remain a very intense hurricane and pose a variety of life-threatening hazards, from devastating winds to a life-threatening catastrophic storm surge in some parts of Jamaica, including the risk for a 6 to 10 foot storm surge near Kingston, the capital. So that's obviously a very serious concern in Jamaica, as well as heavy rainfall. And in locations in the Caribbean where there's steep terrain, then we're always talking about not only the concern from a rainfall perspective for how much falls from the sky, but also in steep terrain, the risk for mudslides and compounding some of those issues. So a wide variety of life-threatening issues on the way for Jamaica on Wednesday. Then we're going to be dealing with serious impacts in the Cayman Islands on Thursday. Then we look toward later in the week for the Yucatan Peninsula.
And as this storm moves to Jamaica and then away, does it look like it's weakening at all?
Yeah, we do think, again, that we are going to start seeing the storm lose a bit of wind intensity. But I want to caution, sometimes people see that and they let their guard down. That is not what you want to do in this type of situation. This is a very serious hurricane. And although the wind intensity may be reduced a bit, the impacts are going to still be very significant, and there are going to be multiple life-threatening impacts, as we talked about, from the winds, the flooding rainfall, and that storm surge and coastal inundation, which is also going to be a major concern. So now is not the time to let your guard down, and people need to rush completions, rush their hurricane planning to completion and all their preparations in Jamaica, as we're going to be dealing with very serious impacts there on Wednesday into Wednesday night.
This storm has been called unprecedented for the last few days. A, do you think it is unprecedented? And B, looking at this storm and looking at all the factors you're laying out between the life-threatening storm surge, mudslide, amongst other things, what are you most concerned about?
Well, as far as this storm being unprecedented, I would say that we certainly oftentimes are dealing with Category 5 hurricanes. Those are the most intense hurricanes, the ones that have the highest wind speed and, of course, result in, on average, some of the most significant destruction. They pose very serious life-threatening hazards in all those different dimensions that we talked about. What's been particularly unusual about this storm is how far south it has brought those serious impacts in the southern Windward Islands, and how early in the season that part of the Atlantic Ocean, those islands were struck. That's what's unprecedented about it. That's the type of situation that we're typically dealing with later in August and into September. So it just shows you how warm that water is. Of course, AccuWeather experts have been talking about that months in advance, well ahead of other sources. And that is why we've been so concerned about that warm water and many things it's good to be running ahead of schedule in life. This is not one of them. We've talked about how warm that water is before, and as a result of that, we can have such an intense storm this early in the year in that part of the Atlantic basin. That is what was unprecedented about it. And then, of course, we're going to continue to be dealing with the rest of these impacts as the storm treks across the Caribbean, and then will threaten the Yucatan Peninsula and portions of southeast Texas.
I want to talk about the timing of this because, as you mentioned, it is very early in the 2024 Atlantic hurricane season. Does this timing and this strength of a storm, I mean, Category 5 has the potential to be devastating. Does that indicate to you that it's going to be a very active hurricane season?
Well, the fact that we had such an intense storm so early in the year, that's obviously, and in that part of the Atlantic basin, that's obviously once again another sign of just how unprecedented this hurricane season can become. AccuWeather experts all the way back at the end of last year started raising the alarm bells, and we've been continuously talking about that ahead of other known sources about how dangerous this hurricane season could become, with the risk for it to become supercharged in terms of not only many storms, but unfortunately serious impacts, and we're already starting to see that this year. So yes, it's just another piece of evidence that shows the concerns about this upcoming hurricane season, or this hurricane season that we're in. And of course, we're just getting started here. We've got many months to go, and our concerns about continued significant impacts, and we need people to be prepared, closely monitoring that AccuWeather forecast. Our team here are watching every cluster thunderstorm, every tropical wave, and assessing whether it can become a tropical storm and a hurricane. Our AccuWeather experts, before all other sources and almost 30 hours before the government's National Hurricane Center issued our first track forecast for the storm that would become Beryl, once again helping to keep people best informed and saving lives. That's what we do here at AccuWeather.
Well, I'm glad you were on the case, but let's say, what should people do to have their hurricane plan, those who live on these islands, versus we are in July, this is peak vacation season. What if you're vacationing on these islands? What should your hurricane plan be too?
Well, Brittany, that's a very important point that we always stress as we head through the hurricane season. Many people are vacationing in the Caribbean. Those are great destinations, except if you're dealing with a hurricane threat. That's why it's just so important to be close to that AccuWeather forecast, closely monitoring. We have great interactive maps on AccuWeather.com that enable you to drill into particular areas and look at the track of the storm. We forecast the storm for out to 7 days here, which is longer than any other source, to keep people best informed. So it's always important, if you have travel plans this summer anywhere along the eastern seaboard in the United States or along the Gulf Coast or anywhere in the Caribbean, to stay informed, know the risks, and have a plan. Should a tropical storm or hurricane threaten your vacation, how are you going to leave early? And make sure you discuss that with your family and you're prepared. It's just something else not to be fearful of, but just something to be aware of, so that if you do need to take action, you're ready to do so.
And let's talk about the United States. This storm was on track to hit a part of Texas. Should the people of Texas be concerned, and particularly what areas?
Okay, so AccuWeather experts, just in reviewing all of the latest data this afternoon, we continue to raise our concern level about the risk for at least some rain and wind across portions of southeast Texas. And our concerns are greatest from, for example, the Houston, Galveston area over toward Port Arthur, all the way south toward Corpus Christi and Brownsville. And the indication is that the storm, as it heads into the weekend, it's going to change its character a little bit. Right now, what I mean by that, right now it's a pretty fast-moving storm in the Caribbean, a very intense storm. As we head into the weekend, it's going to cross the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico and end up in the southern Gulf of Mexico. That's a precarious position for the United States, especially for the western Gulf Coast, and especially for Texas. Now, it's not going to have this, we do not expect it to have the same intensity as it does in the Caribbean right now. That's why I mean the character of the storm will be different. It's likely to be a tropical storm or perhaps a Category 1 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson wind scale. But the issue is that we could be dealing with the risk for damaging winds along parts of the South Texas coastline, especially Corpus Christi on southbound. And what we're most especially concerned about is the risk for flooding rainfall. And the particular concern could be that if the steering winds in the atmosphere really slow down quite a lot, this storm could just slowly move in parts of southeast Texas and could produce a very significant flooding concern in those areas. So that's not for sure at the moment. We're just raising that concern so that people are aware of it here over the coming days. It's something you'll want to stay tuned to the AccuWeather forecast as we continue to refine that here over the next several days. And those impacts, Brittany, would likely start perhaps Sunday night or more likely Monday and Tuesday. So it's a long way out, but we want people to have this on their radar, no pun intended, so that they can start their early preparations and be aware of this threat, especially as we head into the U.S. holiday. Sometimes people are understandably working on traveling or thinking about other things. It's very important to be aware that this threat is there, and stay tuned to later AccuWeather forecast so you can be best prepared and keep your family safer.
Everyone definitely needs to be aware, keep their eye out, especially as we head into the weekend and into next week. Jonathan Porter, thank you so much. We are always so grateful to our friends at AccuWeather for providing these insights.
Good to be with you, and hope everybody stays informed. Frequently checking the AccuWeather forecast here over the next several days.